Welcome to Different Makes a Difference, where we discuss investment matters that matter to everyday investors. Join Odlum Brown's equity analysts as we examine pertinent topics in today's markets and look at things a little differently. Odlum Brown is an independent Canadian investment firm. We provide integrated wealth management solutions to help clients achieve their financial goals, and we've been doing so for over 100 years. Join us for some lessons we've learned along the way that can make a difference for the future. Welcome to Different Makes a Difference. I'm Laura McAleer, Research Communications Coordinator at Odlum Brown. We're recording this in Vancouver in early April. The cherry blossoms are out and the tourist season is already underway. This year, Vancouver is one of only 2 Canadian hosts for the FIFA World Cup, and BC's tourism minister expects up to 350,000 visitors during the tournament alone. It's a lot of people who need a place to stay, and that's where Airbnb comes in. I'm actually an Airbnb host myself, and my calendar is booking up fast for the summer, so this topic hits close to home. With me today is equity analyst Stephen Boland, who just initiated coverage on Airbnb. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Laura.
So I think most people are familiar with Airbnb, but for those who aren't, can you start us off with a brief description of what it does and how it began?
Sure. So Airbnb, it's essentially a platform for listing short-term accommodation. So someone with an apartment or a house, the basement apartment, they're looking to rent out the space on a short-term basis. And another person who's looking for somewhere to rent on a short-term basis, often it's a traveler visiting a new city, is looking for a place to stay. And Airbnb is a way to connect those two parties. And as well as, Airbnb provides services around that. So they collect the payment and give it to the host, for example. And in return, they get a cut of the transaction.
Right. Yeah, it's a super easy platform to work with, I can tell you.
Yeah.
And so tell me, how did it begin, though? It has an interesting origin story, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So it was founded in San Francisco in 2007. There were 3 founders, but 2 of them at the time were living together and they were struggling to pay rent. So they were kind of brainstorming ideas. How do we make a little bit of money? So they were renting an apartment and there was a design conference coming to San Francisco and they knew that a lot of the hotels were booked out, prices were really high. So they came up with this idea to rent out space in their apartments. And what they did is they hauled out air mattresses, those blow-up air mattresses. And they had 3 guests that stayed there and thus became beginnings of what was then called Air Bed and Breakfast, or now Airbnb.
Hence the name. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So it is a global network though now. I mean, this might have started as 3 air mattresses in San Francisco, but this is now available all over the world. Can you talk about that network a little bit?
Yeah, it's huge. They're up today to around 5 million hosts that have about 9 million accommodations in 220 countries. So almost anywhere in the world you go, you can stay at an Airbnb. And there's big advantages to being that global network. We call it the network effect in the business world. And the idea is that more hosts attract more guests and more guests attract more hosts.
Right.
So like yourself putting your basement apartment on Airbnb, you want to go where there's going to be the most potential guests. Why would you go to a different platform? Likewise, if I'm going to Europe tomorrow and I want to stay somewhere, I'm going to look at who has the most listings. So it becomes a very, very valuable network, and Airbnb is the biggest in the world. And the fact that we travel globally and go into different countries, it just makes their network incredibly powerful.
Oh, that's stronger. Yeah. Well, you're an avid traveler, as am I, and we've each had some great experiences staying at Airbnbs, like you said, all over the world. Is that what prompted you to recommend the stock, your personal experience with the platform?
I wouldn't say that's what drove me to the stock, but it certainly has made me quite aware of the product. I've used it a lot. I actually, just for fun, recently I looked back to see the first time I ever used Airbnb. And it was on a trip I did. It was some of the old Yugoslavia countries, Montenegro, Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia. And I looked, and 10 years ago, I looked at the places I stayed. And interestingly, they're all still available today with the same hosts, which speaks to certainly the longevity of people once they get on the platform. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a really good business. And we talked about the network effect. Brand is very powerful. I mean, people don't say, I'm going to go stay at Laura's basement. They say, I'm going to go stay at an Airbnb. And it's got that brand recognition. People go and book directly on the Airbnb website or Airbnb app. And that means they don't have to pay expensive referral fees to another partner, such as Google. We use the term switching costs, which essentially means it's difficult or undesirable for a customer to move away. So if you were to go to a new platform, for example, aside from losing that massive potential guest base, you lose your ratings. And
That's right.
ratings are super valuable. This is strangers staying at strangers' houses. So I've got a rating, you've got a rating.
Yeah.
I don't want to stay somewhere that doesn't have a rating. If you go to a different platform, you don't have that. In addition, Airbnb is what we call asset light. They don't own the real estate. You own the real estate.
Right.
These other 5 million hosts around the world own the real estate. So they don't have to put all that capital down. So Airbnb, it's a very profitable business. And we think its competitive advantages are quite strong.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, the brand is certainly one that I know and like as a traveler and as a host. They make it really easy for both sides of that transaction. So it is already all over the world. Is that how it's going to grow in the future? Is it just a matter of collecting more hosts, or are there other opportunities for growth that you see here for Airbnb?
There's multiple opportunities, and this is a company we think can grow at an above average rate into the double digits for possibly a long time to come. So some of it is simply growing around the world and growing the number of occasions in which people use an Airbnb. So a couple stats I'll throw out. One is that for every night somebody books in an Airbnb, 9 other nights are booked at a hotel. So if they can get a little bit more share from hotels,
Right.
that's more business for them. Certainly globally, we talked about this being a global network. They're in a lot of countries, but 5 countries right now make up 70% of revenue. That's 70. So that leaves a lot of opportunity for them to go and grow. They're going after certain markets right now, like Brazil and India, and having great success. Beyond that, they're actually experimenting in different areas. So I don't know if you've gone recently into your app and you see the little bell at the top, or the little balloon, air balloon. That's advertising, highlighting their new experience and service platform. So the idea here is, if you go to Austin, Texas, for example, and you got a day to kill, you might want to do a tour. You might go walk around the river or something like that. This is a way to get connected with different experiences. So maybe you do a walking tour, maybe you do a boat tour, a bike tour, what have you. You can list on the Airbnb app. Likewise, services, they'll hook you up with chefs or hook you up with people that'll come and give you a massage or what have you. So I think there's a lot of avenues for them to grow, whether it's in their core business or experimenting with some of these new opportunities.
Right. Well, there's a lot of different directions they could go in there. So you mentioned hotels. Is that their primary competitor? Or who's in the competitive landscape here for Airbnb?
Yeah. So, I mean, hotels do, at the end of the day, compete for nights. I think about it as there's often different occasions for Airbnb versus a hotel. There's times I travel, I want to stay at a hotel. There's times I travel, I want to stay at an Airbnb. So back in January, for example, I was in Australia. I wanted to stay next to the beach, and there weren't any nice hotels next to the beach. So I found an Airbnb. It had a kitchen. I wanted a kitchen because I wanted to get up in the morning and make my breakfast really quick and get into the water. It had a second bedroom that we were looking for. Just wouldn't get that at a hotel. So I think there's times it makes a lot of sense. They also compete against Booking and Vrbo. Booking is number 2 in the short-term accommodations, short-term rentals. Booking's actually a really good company, and one we came very close to recommending that one as well, and we're still very intrigued by it. They've got a really interesting company beyond just these short-term rentals. Vrbo will be number 3. They're a well-known name here in North America, but they're a very distant number 3. And it kind of goes back to, in a business that's a network effect advantage business, you want the biggest, and that's Airbnb.
Yeah. So tell me more about the founders. Still part of the day-to-day operations, and that's always something we look for in management teams. Tell me about the management.
Yeah, I love to see founders running a company. They just bring something a little different. They've got that passion. It's their baby. And that's the way it is with Airbnb. So there were 3 founders. They still own more than a quarter of the stock. All 3 are on the board of directors. 2 still are involved in management. And one in particular I'll highlight, his name's Brian Chesky. He's CEO and chairman, so he kind of drives the bus. I think to get a sense of Brian Chesky, it's helpful to look at the character and who's running this company. And a few stories from his past. When he was a child, for example, when he was really young, he wanted to be a hockey player. He wanted to be Wayne Gretzky. And When he got hockey gear for Christmas, he slept in the hockey gear.
Yeah.
And then he realized pretty quick, I'm not really good enough to be a hockey player. So he wanted to become an artist. So his family took him on vacation to Italy, and he sat in front of Michelangelo and he tried to draw it for 8 hours. And his family's there's other things in Italy to see,
Right.
but
Yeah.
he's that kind of fanatic.
Committed.
And that's the commitment that he brings to Airbnb. He's what we call, Charlie Munger used to call Buffett's partner, a learning machine, somebody who just wants to learn. And this is an individual. I mean, he reached out to Barack Obama, and Barack Obama was giving him regular lessons on leadership.
Wow.
And he just continuously learns. And he's done an admirable job at Airbnb. I mentioned that he owns a big stake in the company. He gets paid $1 a year. I mean, he met Warren Buffett, and Buffett said, this is the type of guy that'll work for a dime kind of thing. Now, he does have big stock options in the company,
Sure.
and they'll pay off really big if Airbnb stock goes up a lot. If the stock goes up a lot and he gets paid out, we're going to do well also.
Right. Yeah. So that's some good alignment there. Okay. So we've talked a lot about all the great positives that are around Airbnb. Let's turn the tables a little bit and talk about the risks for a minute. Travel is a luxury spend. Not everybody can afford to do this. And it tends to be the first thing that people cut back on in difficult economic times. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. There's wars, inflation fears, potential recession. The pandemic wasn't that long ago and the whole world shut down during that period. So what happens to Airbnb under those circumstances? How does it hold up in a challenging environment?
Yeah, you're right. Certainly people could cut back on their travel budgets if the economy slows. And in that situation, there is a risk that Airbnb's earnings would fall and potentially its valuation multiple as well. First off, that would be a temporary measure as the economy would eventually come back. But I'd point to a few other things to consider as well. First off, this is a company that has a super strong balance sheet. They have net cash, more cash than they have debt. So they're well positioned for any sort of downturn that happens. There's no guarantee a downturn will happen. Certainly there's economic risks out there. Airbnb has what we call economic sensitivity, the risk that it could go down in a recession. But you want to have some of that in your portfolio. You don't want to just be bunkered away waiting for the world to go bad. And it's good to have some different exposures in your portfolio. In addition, I would say Airbnb, they have growth drivers beyond just the economy. We talked about the international expansion opportunities. We talked about pursuing experiences and services, and they're going to go after a whole host of other opportunities. So there's more than just economic growth here. And last thing I'll mention is that, this desire to travel is pretty strongly innate in humans. We like to explore, we like to adventure. So, if times get a little tighter, maybe people pull back on their vacation to Paris, but they go to Vancouver Island instead and maybe stay at an Airbnb there. But longer term, as the economy comes back, that desire to travel, I think, comes back as well.
Well, and you mentioned valuation too. I imagine if the valuation drops, this is the kind of company that you'd want to buy again at a lower valuation and hold through a storm.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good point. This is a company that went public in late 2020, and we took a pretty good look at it back then, and we thought the stock was just a little bit too expensive. We liked the business, but here we are now, 5.5 years later, and the stock's pretty much where it was when it went public. But the business earnings have gone up, revenue has gone up, so the valuation multiple has come down quite a bit. Slight premium to the market today, but you're getting a much better business than the market with faster growth. And it's under earning in ways because it's investing a lot back in its business for that future growth. So when I look at a company that can grow double digits and is trading at a pretty reasonable multiple, it might not be rock bottom, could get worse. If it does, given the quality of the business, the great management team, the strength of the balance sheet, it's one, not only would we be comfortable holding through tough times, if the opportunity presents itself and people had the cash proceeds, it's one that I think you could comfortably add to.
Right. Yeah. So there's an argument that homeowners like me who Airbnb part of their homes might actually be making housing more challenging because it limits long-term rental supply. The city of Vancouver is pretty stringent on what it allows as an Airbnb, and I suspect there are other jurisdictions who put up a similar fight. Isn't that a major risk to the business model? How does Airbnb manage that dynamic across all of its locations?
It's certainly a challenge that they have to work through and work on with municipalities. It's not something that's new. This has been something they've been working on in different regions for years now. And the regulatory pressure tends to ebb and flow. Take Berlin, for example. A number of years ago, they essentially banned Airbnb totally. Right. And then a year or two later, they kind of opened up a bit again. So you see this ebb and flow. Certainly, Vancouver's put its restrictions in place. But what Airbnb does is they try to work with municipalities to come up with sensible rules. So as you know, you live in your house above and you have a business license, so you follow the city's rules.
Yeah.
Airbnb tries to get involved in developing rules that can work for the municipalities and hopefully for the hosts and the guests and the broader stakeholder community in addition to itself. They're trying to work with municipalities to help be a partner more and more. So I think the Paris Olympics is an interesting example where you talked earlier about the World Cup, the city of Vancouver swelling with tourists. Same thing happened with the Olympics in Paris. And all of a sudden they had to house a bunch of people, and Airbnb could be part of the solution. So you try to build some goodwill that way.
Right.
This idea of working with municipalities to help develop the rules or help regulators understand different points of view, I would argue that actually widens the moat. And what I mean by that, it makes it harder for a new competitor to come in and compete with Airbnb because it goes back to that global network again. They know what the regulations are in Vancouver and Toronto and Seattle and Miami and Sao Paulo and everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
If you try to go in and build that, you gotta learn all that. You gotta try to figure all that out. It's just another barrier to entry. And I think as much as anything, it has to remember that tourism has a lot of benefits as well. So look, long-term housing is a problem in a lot of cities. A lot of cities want tourism as well because it brings capital, it brings jobs, it brings taxes. And I was reading an article recently about Barcelona, Spain, and they've got some pretty strict Airbnb rules coming in the next couple of years. And the article went something along the lines of Barcelona hosted the Olympics. After that, they wanted to increase tourism. And they expanded their airport and they built a new runway and they attracted discount airlines and they built a new cruise ship terminal and they promoted conferences and they promoted tourism. And it worked. And then all of a sudden they said, oh, we got too many tourists.
There's no logic.
So there's that balancing act that has to be met. And I would point out that even if a city like Barcelona decides to get strict, New York City got really strict a couple of years ago. No city is more than 2% of Airbnb's revenue. So New York City in September 2023 came up with really, really strict regulations. In the quarters and years that followed, Airbnb continued to grow at a double-digit rate. So they work with the municipalities. They've got lots of experience with it.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it goes back to the founder as well. This is a founder-led company. Brian Chesky is going to do everything he can to work for the long-term benefit of Airbnb in a way that hopefully works with the cities as well.
Yeah. Well, so far they've been pretty successful, I'd say. So, well, thanks, Steve. I enjoyed that conversation. Airbnb has been around for a long time, and it's got a great management team led by its founder, which is always something we like to see. It's trading at a reasonable valuation and has some viable growth opportunities. And sounds like we're pretty comfortable with the company if they have to manage some near-term challenges. So thanks again, Steve, and thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share it with others. Thank you for listening to another episode of Different Makes a Difference. Just as every individual is unique, so are your financial circumstances. Be sure to talk to your professional advisors for advice related specifically to you. Our podcast is for general information purposes for Canadians only. The views expressed are those of the presenters and may not reflect the opinions of Odlum Brown. Be sure to check out our full disclaimer and subscribe to the podcast at odlumbrown.com/differentmakesadifference. Odlum Brown is a member of the Canadian Investor Protection Fund.